Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bright Founders Talk at Temi. Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Welcome to our podcast, where we bring you the most inspiring stories of entrepreneurs and experts in the software development industry. And each week, we interview successful leaders who share their unique journeys and valuable insights. I'm your host, Barry, and today we're lucky enough to have a remarkable guest joining us, Eric Anderson, who is CTO and founder at SynMax. Hello, Eric. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. We know you're very busy. For those people who don't know you or your company, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. That would be most people, probably almost all of them. But my name's Eric Anderson, like you said, CTO, and I'm one of the co-founders of a company called SynMax, and we're a defense and intelligence company. So we started about 4 years ago. It'll be 4 years this summer. We actually spun out of a commodity hedge fund called Skylar Capital. I was a quantitative analyst there, and I worked for Bill Perkins, who was the primary trader and the owner of the fund. We recognized very early on that there was tremendous value in this huge proliferation that had been going on in the market for the past few years at the time in commercial satellite imagery. So we were able to, capture some of that value, build some models internally based on that, and use it for executing new kinds of trading ideas in the market. And Bill loved it so much that he decided to start SynMax. So he's the company president, the founder. I'm co-founder. And then we brought in Brendan Moore, CEO, who had recently become available on the market. He was the head of intelligence for the NCA, which you should know about. That's the National Crime Agency in the UK.
For listeners unfamiliar with satellite-based analytics, how would you best describe what SynMax does in plain terms?
Sure, yeah. So I'd say that we are a part of a data value chain. So like I was talking about, there's been an enormous amount of commercial satellites that have launched over the last 10 years. A lot of this is due to two factors, right? So one is we've had something called the CubeSat revolution, which traditionally satellites built by NASA, European Space Agency, others, they're very big and expensive things, right? They engineer them for space. They engineer them to last a long time. And a lot of that is because launch costs are so high, right? Well, a number of innovators have discovered, 5 or 10 years ago, that you can build satellites cheaply using off-the-shelf parts. You can put them in low Earth orbit where their orbits are only going to last 3 to 5 years anyways. And you can change the entire economic equation of delivering satellite images that historically have cost tremendous amounts of money and only governments have been able to get, and sell them to kind of a nascent market for satellite imagery. So the second factor is that launch costs have come down so much, and this was led by companies like SpaceX and Rocket Lab. They've precipitously dropped the cost of launch costs, and so they've made this entire market emerge out of nothing. So getting back to your original question, we sit in this value chain where satellite images are the raw material, right? There's an end customer who has some type of business intelligence or even government intelligence problem that they're trying to solve, and SynMax fits in the middle. So we work with satellite operators. We purchase enormous amounts of imagery from them. To give you an idea, every single day we ingest through our AI models enough images to cover the entire landmass of the United States, including Alaska, 2.5 times.
Oh, wow.
So that's
Incredible.
the volume of data that we're talking about. And from that, we produce these business intelligence or government intelligence products, which, we sell. Our start was in energy trading, because we had a proficiency there. We sell products to some of the largest hedge funds in the world who are making billions of dollars worth of trading decisions based on the insights that we're gleaning. And we sell to governments, too. We have a defense and intelligence product that specializes in maritime domain awareness called THEA, which is being sold to the U.S. government and a number of our allies.
Incredible. It's so interesting. How did you actually get into this particular field? Was it kind of like through your own change in interest, like from where you started in your business? Or was it kind of like serendipitous? You just happened to be speaking to the right person?
It was very non-deliberate. We had no intention of getting into it. I think, if there was an origin of the idea, it's probably when Bill Perkins attended Will Marshall's TED Talk. So Will Marshall is the CEO of Planet Labs, and he was talking about a revolutionary idea he had to take these. They're they're no bigger than, a bottle of water. They're about this big. And he calls them doves. And they're basically just a camera, right? That's all the space you have. So, the optics takes up almost the entire thing. And then, obviously there's a little bit of room for electronics and antenna to be able to uplink and downlink instructions. And Will Marshall had a crazy idea that he was going to cover the entire Earth with satellites. He was going to get the entire landmass of the Earth covered once a day. And Bill was immediately interested in the potential trading applications of this, getting access to this intelligence. So as Bill's quant, he looped me in and handed me the project to execute on some of these ideas. And when we recognized there was a huge amount of value here, Bill saw the opportunity to create something new.
So when you're looking at all that data, like how do you handle like false positives or misleading visuals? Is it very AI focused or how does that work?
Yeah, it has to be AI focused. AI is a tremendous tool, and I think its biggest advantage is its scale, right? So, intelligence-wise, AI is continually improving. I don't believe AI has surpassed human intelligence, and I think most experts would agree with me, but it's infinitely scalable, right? So long as you have the resources, you can deploy it on any amount of data. And when you're looking at the ocean, I mean, it's 2/3 of the Earth's surface, so you must rely on AI. And like you talked about, that can create false positives, false negatives, right? Misrepresentations that are not intentional unless you carefully control your models. So, we have a CI/CD pipeline in place for retraining our models, right? We have a team of human intelligence analysts, most of which are veterans, ex-military intelligence analysts. And they're responsible for regularly reviewing random samples of this data to ensure the models are performing well.
I bet it's incredible. I bet you don't get bored going into work any day, do you?
Yeah, it's been very exciting. I mean, there's a lot of components to running a business. There's a lot of things that somebody has to deal with them. It's not all fun work, right? If I had complete control over my day, yeah, I probably would never stop working with the and our different products and just diving deep into the data, because that's why we started this business. We all love doing it. But I do think that is an advantage for us, right? Like, we have to compete for talent in the market like anybody else. And it is so great to be able to go to a talented person that you would like to work at SynMax and, hey, I'm not Meta and I'm not Google and I'm not Apple. And, I don't have a market valuation of, near $1 trillion, right? And I can't offer you the same kind of things that they offer you. But I can promise you that you are going to work on fascinating things, right? And I can promise you that you're going to feel like your job here is going to have a real impact on the world. You could go to Facebook and you could spend your entire career trying to optimize a tiny algorithm that gets people to like something a little bit much. And I'm sure you could have a promising and fulfilling career, and I'm sure it could be challenging and exciting and interesting. But I mean, at the end of your life, you're going to look back and wonder what a real impact you had. And if you come to SynMax, I can promise you that you're going to make a big difference so long as we can.
You've already got me interested, so I can imagine the excitement from anyone watching this. It seems like it's an incredible job to do. You mentioned the marketplace there. Like, how do you view yourself, and in terms of the marketplace, what are you doing differently that makes you stand out from the competition?
I think we benefit from being an early mover in the space. I think we benefit from Bill's vision. He's the company president, and the fact that he recognized that there was a potential market here before anybody, I think, had really solved it. There's definitely companies that have competed in this space longer than we have. I think a lot of them have learned some hard lessons that we were able to benefit from. Bill took all that in, and he found a unique and different path and a way for us to differentiate ourselves. And we've been very successful because of that. I'll give you a couple examples, right? So I don't want to name any names. I don't want to talk bad about competitors, but I think there was a bias in our industry very early on towards free data. NASA has free data through the Landsat program. The European Space Agency has free data through the Sentinel program. And these satellites, they're open source. Anybody can go download these images. And a lot of companies got addicted to free, right? So I think that these images, they're much lower resolution than what you can buy on the commercial market, but they're free, right? So it's a tempting business proposition to say, I'm going to make my input free, right? And then whatever I sell my output for, it's going to be profitable, right? And the problem is that these images at their low resolution, they only have a certain theoretical maximum extractable value that you can pull out of them, right? And they've been around long enough that the market has gotten that value to 85, 90%, right? So you're entering in a competitive space where, everyone is fighting to get the last 10%. And it is a marginally increasing cost to rinse additional value out of it. So while other companies in our space, right, were spending tons on data science and engineering to try and rinse a couple extra percentage points out of this free data, right, SynMax jumped over all of that, went straight to higher resolution data, which, yes, we have to pay for, but you know, the high resolution stuff, when you get it to only 50% of its value, it's already at 150% of the low resolution stuff. And so we were able to, move faster and create products that provided higher value intelligence. And it turns out that the cost of the imagery, more than offset the cost savings of trying to engineer extra value out of these free images.
Just as you were talking, then it came to me. Like, are you exploring like real time or near real time intelligence delivery? Is that something that you think is possible? If you're not doing it now, what are the challenges in making it work?
It's definitely possible. What's currently in space right now mostly relies on ground stations, right? So as a satellite orbits the Earth, it makes a complete orbit every 90 minutes in low Earth orbit. So that means every 45 minutes, if you're in a sun synchronous orbit, which is how most of them operate because the industry has found that's the best kind of imaging orbit for you to take. Every 45 minutes, you go over one of the poles, and that's where most of the ground stations are. So you can take your photos, and then when you get over the ground station, you can downlink them, and that's the closest that most everything in space right now gets to being able to get you images quick. Well, once you get them on the ground, there's still some work to do. The images have to be processed. They have to be geo-rectified. They have to be sharpened. Some of this can be done automatically. Other parts of it, if there's some kind of anomaly or something, it still has to be handled. Thankfully, I don't have to deal with any of that. The satellite operators deliver a clean product back to us. But, what you're looking at is, in the best case, it's going to be a 3-hour delay. 3 hours, that's pretty acceptable, right? For most applications, 3 hours is more than adequate. But, there is a whole category of capabilities and use cases that can get unlocked if you can get something closer to real time, like you're talking about. So the way that the industry is shifting, most of the next generation satellites, the stuff that's going up on rockets right now, it will contain an inter-satellite link. Almost everybody's sensors have this technology on it. So in the not so distant future, satellites aren't going to have to rely on ground stations. And instead, they have an antenna on the back of them where they can talk to the communication satellites in geosynchronous orbit. Common question I get is, why not talk to Starlink? Well, Starlink is usually lower Earth orbit than the imaging satellite. So one, they're not in the right orbit for you to be able to talk to them. And two, that's not their business model. Their antennas are very directional. I would love it if SpaceX would create a capability like that, and maybe it's on their roadmap, or maybe it's been announced and I hadn't heard about it yet. But right now, what most people are doing is, they talk to the geosynchronous, geostationary satellites behind them and beam a signal down to the Earth. And that's very expensive to do. You're talking about a connection that might be 100, 200 kilobits per second, costing $25,000, $50,000 a month, right, to be able to access it. But, there's another technological force on these satellites that's making that more possible, and that is edge compute. So I talked a lot about Planet Labs. They're a great partner of ours, and, them and others are taking advantage of putting GPUs in space, right? So then you have the combination of, the satellite taking pictures, the GPU processing out with AI in space exactly what you want, and then the geosynchronous instantaneous connection that can then send it all down to the ground really fast. We're not there yet, but all the pieces are falling in place, and I think that's kind of the next chapter for this whole thing.
Thinking a bit longer term, you talked on the future there a little bit with what you said, but like geospatial analytics, where do you think it's headed in the next, say, 10 years?
10 years is a long time for this industry. I don't know, this industry has barely been around for 10 years. I think, a lot of the time that we've been around, it's been focused on trying to discover the opportunities and, continually pivoting from one idea to the next to figure out where there's product market fit. But, like I was talking about earlier, I think the advantage that this has is in situations where there's low sensor competition, right? I talk to operators all the time, and I tell them, you think that this other company over here, I'm talking to satellite company A, you think satellite company B is your competitor. They're not, right? Your real competitor is every other sensor on the planet, right? You're competing with webcams, and you're competing with Google Maps data, and you're competing with drones, and you're competing with all these other attempts to gather critical intelligence that in many cases are cheaper and higher quality than you. You're between 300 and 500 miles above the Earth. Like it's, you're way further away trying to glean the same intelligence that somebody with a drone, right, can get by just, flying it over and get a beautiful high resolution picture. So my thought is that, where the satellite industry and where geospatial intelligence can add the most value is when it can, one, combine sources of information together, right? Just because SynMax, we have a proficiency in satellite images doesn't mean we shouldn't also be taking drone images and we shouldn't also be gathering intelligence other ways, right? That's why we market ourselves as an intelligence company. And two, go where the sensor competition is low. I mean, that's where the most value is, right? Go where there's not as much intelligence being gleaned and the problem is hard to solve and you're the one to solve it. And so then you get to capture the excess value. So over the next 10 years, I think it's going to be different from the current 10 years where a lot of satellite operators and geospatial intelligence companies have been focusing on large urban areas, right? And trying to sell products that are counting cars or, doing change detection in an area where there's a better sensor. And they're going to figure out that, the real opportunity is to go where there's valuable intelligence that hasn't been gathered any other way.
I'm kind of just curious listening to you talk, and it sounds like really exciting work. Has your vision changed for SynMax since it first launched? Did you have a different mindset? Did you have different goals? Or have you pretty much stayed par for the course?
Oh, no, I've learned tons of lessons since we started this, right? And that's the first one. The first lesson is to stay humble and to admit your mistakes and learn from them and move on and not carry baggage around from them. I mean, when we first launched, we had a bunch of different ideas for products, right? And we generated proof of concepts on some of them and started, pushing things out into the market to see if there was fit and whatnot. And we had to scrap a bunch of stuff, right? And we still scrap a lot of stuff. We definitely didn't have like a vision from the very beginning that we're going to be where we are today just because we started. In fact, I wish I'd kept a copy around of our very first website, the first synmax.com, which, by the way, I was able to get that domain name for $3. That's incredible, right? Nobody had thought of the word SynMax before. I'm still not sure what it means. I didn't come up with it, but at least the domain name was cheap. But the first version of our website was so vague, and it reflected the fact that we really did not have a core vision. But we had this idea that there's a growing need for data intelligence, right? And there is a growing availability of data, particularly in the satellite space. And so, we just need to find the right intersection between those two things and execute on them.
And we were talking, you were kind of selling how good your company is, especially for potential employees. Could you just tell us a little bit about the kind of culture that you're building at SynMax, like especially for engineers and data scientists?
I mean, this is a big topic, right? So company culture is one of your largest non-quantifiable assets. And unfortunately, it's not always within your control, right? Especially as the company grows. You have influence over it. You can set precedent and examples. You can intervene and set guardrails around certain types of behavior. But largely, the culture is going to be a function of the people that you hire, right? If you hire a bunch of toxic jerks, then I don't see how any amount of direction from the top is ever going to make a positive culture at a company. So, I think it's inseparable from your hiring and selection practices to set company culture. So, when we interview people, we look for people that are excited about a lot of things and that are inquisitive and are interested in stuff, right? One of my favorite early on interview questions that I'd ask them, I'd say, tell me something you don't think I already know, right? Anything, like it is any topic you want, right? If you're a naturally inquisitive person, if you're constantly loving to learn new things, I mean, you should be able to go for 45 minutes on any number of topics, right? If you're somebody that loves to read or loves to watch or loves to educate themselves or is constantly running experiments, you can do that. I'm not trying to disparage anybody who isn't that way, right? Like, we all have different goals in life. And, some people, they're passionate about a small number of things and they're perfectly happy and they have their life goals, right? But I think in order for us to be an innovative company that's willing to move fast and break things, like we have to set the culture with the kind of people that are always going to be questioning themselves and wanting to learn more about things they know nothing about.
So I am incredibly inquisitive, but unfortunately I am a toxic jerk, so I probably wouldn't meet the criteria for your company.
Oh, that's a shame. But at least you're honest about it, right?
Yes, I've got that going for me. We are unfortunately coming towards the end of the interview. The last question I always ask is what kind of advice would you give to someone who is maybe starting up a company for the first time or wants to be an entrepreneur? Using your experience, what would you tell them?
I think most people that want to be an entrepreneur already accept the fact that it's going to be a tremendous amount of work, right? So, it's probably not worth mentioning how much work it is. People recognize that, right? I don't think people are trying to go into entrepreneurship because they think it'll be an easy, cushy job. I know that I wanted to be an entrepreneur my entire life. A lot of members of my family were entrepreneurs, and I always idolized them. And the one thing I could never figure out that people don't like talking about is, well, how do you get money to do it? We're all working jobs, okay? Like we're all committed 9 to 5, right? To be able to support ourselves and those that we love, right? Like it's not like you can just side hustle most businesses, especially not one this complicated. And even if you could, right, like you need money to be able to pay for the input data. That was the hardest thing, right? That's what kept me in the finance world for so long is the fact that like I didn't know how to raise money. So I think the best advice for people who want to be entrepreneurs is to make yourself exceptional at whatever it is that you're doing and make sure that you're self-promoting about it, right? Sounds a little bit cheap, but America, and I'm sorry, UK is fantastic too, but America is the number one entrepreneurship country in the world, and it has made us an absolute superpower, right? More Fortune 500 companies are born here than anywhere else in the world. Most of the value, the new value that's created in the world is created here. And it's because we have this rich ecosystem of one, people that are willing to take risks and try to be disruptive and build new things. And two, we actually have a finance industry that's very supportive of taking that kind of risk, right? So, you have to be able to prove, right, to the people who have capital to allocate to good ideas that you're worthy of that investment. And that means, they're going to critique everything about you. You need to have a high moral character. You need to have a proven track record at everything you do, right? I think people have this misconception that it's some kind of closed system and there's people at a country club and they just invest in each other's businesses. And I have not seen any evidence of that whatsoever, right? Like if you are good at what you do, no matter what it is, and you build a good reputation for yourself and you are outspoken about new ideas and, willing to go on social media and teach people about what you know, right? You're the kind of person that people are going to be willing to take risk on. So I think that's the hardest part for most people who want to be entrepreneurs is trying to raise money and trying to get somebody else to believe in them. Well, like ideas are a dime a dozen. Okay. There are so many good ideas out there. Like what is worth anything is the ability to execute on it. So if you go to a venture capitalist or a private equity firm and you tell them a brilliant idea, great, you've crossed the first hurdle and they're going to love that, right? But then the next thing is they're going to assess whether or not you are the kind of person who can execute that idea. And the way you prove that to them is with a track record in whatever you've been doing throughout your life that you show that you can execute on things. That's
incredible.
That's my 2 cents worth of advice. Take it for what you will.
I think it's worth more than that. It's gold. So thank you so much for that. I already feel inspired to start up my entrepreneurship. Eric, look, it's been lovely talking to you. I really want to thank you for taking time out of your day to talk to me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
That was Eric Anderson, CTO and co-founder at SynMax.